Uh, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you all have a great lunch for today. I mean, it's Friday, so yeah. And today will be the last session that I'm gonna cover two sessions. One will be the assessment of higher order models. Some people would say the second order construct, and the fourth session will be the measurement invariance. So if you have any question, you can feel free to drop your question in the chat so that I could actually try to tackle the question and try to assist from the best of my side. Okay. Okay. Again, welcome to everyone. My name is Jacky Cheah Junhua. Just call me Jacky would do. As you can see, again, some quick introduction. I'm from University Putra Malaysia, School of Business and Economics. I'm very thankful, grateful that Dr. Hiram invited me to conduct this session again. So yeah, I will do my best to so that you guys can actually somehow could actually understand all these stuff. So to keep it short and simple, if you are new to me, new for today's session 3, session 4, yeah, I'm born in 1988, previously from UTM as a senior lecturer. Then I moved to UPM and great acknowledgement by Griffith University to be one of their marketing cluster member from Griffith University. And then if you see my field, I'm from consumer behavior. I like to do research on consumer behavior regardless what context, multidisciplinary context. As long as it is consumer behavior, that is something that I love to, spend to do this type of research. Okay. And as you can see, on the bottom right hand side, I spent throughout my journey to learn a lot of tools, software, and then learn some different techniques to learn about quantitative research, how we can actually robustly work on our data analysis. So that's a bit about me on using different type of software. And in terms of international attachment, several attachment from Taiwan, Germany, and then Indonesia, and so on. So that's a bit some background. And as you can see, usual editorial review boards. I've been not just holding position, being an editorial review board, we have to review articles. So therefore, from that experience and background itself, I can see the trend of like using PLS getting to boom throughout the years. And from there itself, you also can check out my Google Scholar if you're interested to know more about me. So that's all about me. I try to keep it short and simple. So quote of the day for today will be, as you can see from the slide, there will be, there will always be obstacle. There will be always doubters. There will be mistakes that, human makes. Humans are not perfect. But if we work hard, and I believe there's no limits, therefore, I hope this quote of the day will actually help you to, move on towards your next phase of life, to work harder in life. So yeah, that's a bit quote of the day. So to keep it short and simple, let us start with the assessment of higher order model. Some people will call it as second order model. Some people also will call it as hierarchical component models. So there are different terminologies. So to keep it, sweet and short and simple, we just use either higher order models and second order models so that it could facilitate your understanding in this particular talk. So as looking back on those review articles on PLS, especially stated very clear in tourism and hospitality management, the use of hierarchical order model components or second order seems to be quite lacking, right? Why lacking? Because maybe there's a lot of difficulties to actually perform this technique, or maybe it is, there are so many ways to actually could conduct this technique, such as using repeated indicator approach, two-stage approach, hybrid approach, and now there are more new techniques along the way. So there are a lot of confusion using this higher order or second order construct when performing the analysis in PLS. But what I would like to highlight here today is just showing you the most fundamental way of doing things that you could actually use it in your empirical research work easily, and you can actually cope with it. And if there's any questions regarding second order, you could actually use this technique in the most easy way, and you could actually address or maybe reply towards reviewer or examiners. So today I'm going to show you the most very fundamental way, okay, of doing this higher order construct. But as you can see, there's been a growing of using higher order construct, because what we see from higher order construct perspective, it is very sophisticated, right? When we talk about sophisticated, people have this mentality: when your model is sophisticated, the chances for you to publish is always higher. But the question here is, would it worth to do higher order construct? So today I'm going to explain a lot of the theoretical, fundamental, how to actually execute the higher order model construct, and so on. Okay. So if you would like to ask me, before I really start on this notion, the idea of higher order construct, people would like to ask me, hey, Jacky, would you like to do higher order construct model for your model? My answer should be yes and no, but most likely I will put no 60% or 70% higher than the yes. Why? There's a lot of debates and confusion using this higher order construct. Before we move into PLS, the biggest problem is the measurement theory, right? The measurement theory of whether you're supposed to do a higher order construct or not. So if you ask me, Jacky, whether you want to do higher order construct, my answer should be most likely no. I'm not a big fan of higher order construct, although I write higher order construct paper and model, but I'm not a big fan to it. But if there's no choice and literature said so, then yeah, by all means, please go ahead with higher order construct model. But I will explain again why I'm not a big fan of higher order construct. So higher order construct, as you can see, it allows modeling a construct on a higher level of abstraction with its concrete subdimension. In other words, take it very simple that I use marketing mix. When we talk about marketing mix, we have the 4P: price, place, product, and promotion. If you want to measure marketing mix, you need to have this concrete subdimension. And this concrete subdimension will represent the 4P, and the 4P will form the higher abstraction of concept where we call the marketing mix. As you can see, there's a higher level of abstraction going up to the second order construct. Therefore, you need to have a strong fundamental observation of measurement theory. From there itself, when there's a nomological validity behind of that dimension to form a second order construct, therefore, you will have your higher order construct. So it seems confused with my explanation. Let me make it very simple to you. As you can see, the next slide, higher order construct, if you want to measure satisfaction as higher order construct or second order components, we could have dimension of price, service quality, personal, servicescape to form satisfaction. So as you can see on the blue column there, that is what we call the first order model, or lower order components, or lower order construct, or dimension. There's a lot of terminologies behind, but all these dimension itself will be an important ingredient that form the second order construct or components. And as you can see, the red color column there, that is what we call the second order components or higher order construct. So I hope you know this fundamental. Some of the very great example that I always explain of using a second order construct could be in a skill development process. When we look into a skill development process, a lot of past studies literature always develop skills using dimension rather than unidimension, but they focus on dimensionality where you have multi-dimension. For example, past study, when we talk about knowledge sharing, it could be explicit and implicit knowledge sharing. And as skill development evolve regarding this concept of knowledge sharing, people start to develop a better second order construct with appropriate dimension to fit in the context of current scenario, such as knowledge sharing no longer look into explicit and tacit knowledge. Rather, people look into organization communication, communities of practice, personal interaction, as well as written communication. So as you can see, second order construct is not just do an empirical research and then there you go, your second order construct have hypothesis significant. second order construct can be used also for skill development. So I hope you get some understanding regarding the skill development. And this is also same with the market orientation concept. When we talk about market orientation, it could be a second order construct that could be measured by market intelligence, dissemination of market intelligence, as well as responsiveness of market intelligence. And this is by Coley and Jarowski, that market orientation can be measured by second order construct. But before I move the importance of second order construct, let me explain to you the very fundamental explanation just now that I highlight one important point. I'm not a big fan of second order. You can do it. There's no problem of doing it, but I'm not a big fan. Okay. As I progress as a researcher and I learn from multiple peoples, as well as I have published articles on second order, I found that the ambiguous of second order tends to create worse, especially when I see there are some paper published, okay? There are some paper published in top ranking journals, SSCI and so on. They are lucky if they're published, but when I look into their conceptual and the modeling itself using second order, it tends to be weird, okay? I stop share here, I will move to whiteboard. Why I say it is weird. So give me a second, I will stop share here, then I move to the whiteboard. Okay, now we are in whiteboard. Why I say that it is weird?
Jacky, I think we lose you. Hello, Jacky.
Into second order, and I'm not okay.
Jacky,
so yeah,
we lose you for about 15 seconds.
Oh, okay. Probably the line suddenly.
Okay.
Where? I mean, where I actually lose. Where you actually lose me?
You show the whiteboard and then we lose you.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Okay, not important. You lose me that 15 seconds. Not important because right now the whiteboard is here. Okay. Sorry about. Apologize for that. Yeah, internet connection could be a problem. Okay. Right now, I'm not a big fan of second order. And I'm going to tell you why I'm not a big fan of second order. Okay, so to keep it short and simple, let me use an example of a theory called resource-based view. If you are in business, I mean most likely you will heard before this theory called resource-based view, RBV, right? What does RBV stands for? RBV stands for whether how firms able to utilize their tangible, intangible resources, capability to sustain their performance of their companies, right? RBV, that's the definition of RBV. So using this theory of RBV, people will always say that, oh, I could have tangible construct, okay, tangible, and then I could have intangible. Okay, I just put two, okay? We have capability, but then just put tangible, intangible for now. And I saw some people, because they are so into theory itself, you have tangible, intangible. And tangible itself, we could have dimension of, there are several dimensions like, resources, finance, monetary, cash flow, and so on. And then we also have dimension of intangible. And here itself, we have item, all the items of each of the dimension, okay, and then here point it to performance. Okay, based on theory, a lot of people will argue that, oh, this could be a right research model. Why? Because according to theory, if firms able to utilize their tangible, intangible resources, they could lead to performance. That is what theory have mentioned. But the question here is whether this is correct or wrong. I have tried uses this understanding, this concept to ask a lot of students. A lot of students will tell me, yes, it is correct. Why? Because theory said so. But there's no such thing to measure tangible and intangible as second order construct. Tangible and intangible, it is not a construct. Okay, it is also not a variable, okay? It is just a label that explains tangible, what are the tangible, intangible, what are the intangibles. So therefore, there's a lot of ambiguous using a second order construct. But there are researchers, just assume tangible, intangible as a second order construct to lead to performance. Therefore, at the very beginning of the process, they could run analysis with it, but at the end, it is actually incorrect. There's no such thing called tangible, intangible as a construct. So this is one example. The other example, I use this example always by Prof. Ramaya. This example, I also met that student before. There's this construct called, some people will name this as critical success factor. Critical success factor could lead to performance. Okay, critical success factor could have dimension of this one, and this one, and this one. For example, we have project champion, we have leadership, we have technologies, we have finance, and so on. So as a company, we will know that critical success factor will always lead to performance. And then there are some people use critical success factor as second order construct. So the question here is this right or wrong? My answer to you is definitely wrong. According to theory will say that, oh yeah, critical success factor could lead to performance. But the question here is, we can't measure critical success factor because critical success factor is just a label. It is not even a construct at all. So if you do so, then it is actually incorrect. But, sometimes you are lucky, out of 10 papers, you just submit one, out of 10 papers, you submit 10, and then out of that 10, maybe one you will lucky get published. But it does not make sense to say that when you have high critical success factor, high performance, because the question here is factors. Okay, critical success factor, what factors we are talking about. So therefore, you can't simply develop the second order construct. Okay, it does not make sense for you to simply develop second order construct. Okay, it does not make sense. Okay, another thing is marketing mix. Okay, I use another example is marketing mix. In the past, there are people debate that marketing mix is not, or it is impossible to do a second order construct. But in recent years, there are people proven that marketing mix can be a second order construct. So there are a lot of ambiguous whether it's supposed to be a second order construct or not. But there are many top journals right now have debated that marketing mix could be a second order construct. And also I came across that people talk about service quality, right? Like service quality, it is very clear cut because we are measuring service quality as a concept itself. Therefore, that could be a second order construct. Like marketing mix, it seems like mix, right? Mix, what type of mix you're talking, right? But there are some people argue and have top journals published that marketing mix could be a second order construct. So right now, it is doable for you to do marketing mix as second order construct. But in the past, when you submit any article using marketing mix as a second order construct, your paper will get rejected. So therefore, what I want to conclude here to you guys is that it seems like second order construct seems to be fancy, but it's a bit difficult. Sometimes there are a lot of uncertainty, right? Sometimes students come to me and say, oh, Jacky, this is my model, second order construct. What do you think? And I could say that I'm not sure, especially when there are students from, education background, I'm from business, and they come to me with the second order construct. I'm not sure whether it's supposed to be a second order construct. So therefore, you need to seek expert and advice from your field whether it's supposed to do a second order construct. Of course, a second opinion would be a better choice when you form a second order construct. So that is my answer to you why I'm not a big fan of second order construct, because there are a lot of uncertainty. Even I'm from marketing field, I do a lot of marketing research. There are some variables sometimes when I look into the literature, I'm not certain and sure whether it's supposed to do a second order construct. So that is my answer why I'm not a big fan. But another thing I would like to highlight before we continue to the slide is about when you ask me, Jacky, when to use a second order construct. If you tell me that if you have an independent variables, right? Independent variables is your, your predictors, your determinants, your antecedent, then if your IV is a second order construct, then supposedly it should be okay. I always like to tell people when I do a second order construct, I prefer an approach called funnel approach. Why? Funnel approach, if your IV is a second order construct, it is still okay, right? Because I want to keep things parsimonious, right? If your mediator, I always like to use mediator as a second order construct. Why? Because it keeps things parsimonious. If you don't use second order, I'm not saying this is a way for you to do a second order construct. What I want to highlight to you is funnel approach. When I do a second order construct, I like to do funnel approach. Like I saw some people that, oh, my endogenous, which is my DV here, the DV here could be multiple dimension, right? I tested in multiple dimension. I do not like to do so. Why? Because when you test it in multiple dimension, you do not know what is the focus of your story when you do a second order construct. Therefore, if DV, I still prefer just focus at could be should be unidimension and so on. But if you have a moderator, let's say you have a moderator, and your moderator moderates here and here, then for moderator, I also prefer a second order construct rather than multi-dimension. If moderator, you have multi-dimension, you have to test multiple times of moderator with the interaction effect. When you do so, this is a big problem where you need more sample size for you to run the analysis, and the things get more complicated when you have a lot of interaction. Therefore, if you have IV as second order, it could be nice, simple for you to do so. If you have a mediator as second order, still okay. But when you move into endogenous, I don't like to test it multiple dimension. Rather, you could be a second order. But when we talk about IV, moderator itself, I always prefer second order. It would be a very simple way of doing things. So it is, when I do a second order, I always prefer funnel approach to keep things simple. Of course, some people will say that, oh, mediator, I would like to test multiple mediators so that it looks fancy. It is okay. But sometimes you need to strike, what I should say that you need to strike research in terms of complicated model and parsimonious model, okay? I always like to do research in parsimonious, unless you want to make your model so fancy, but again, fancy model doesn't lead you to, good SSCI journal. So therefore, you need to strike the balance, right? You need to strike the balance to see when to use a second order or not. So this is my second advice. Besides, I'm not a big fan of second order. The second thing is, you do a second order for parsimonious, but sometimes you need to know when to use it, okay? So that is the short advice. Now let us go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, we are into the PowerPoint. Why HEM is important, or why should I say second order is important, okay? When you do a second order, researcher can exploit certain favorable characteristic. For example, when you do a second order construct, I always see second order construct like, you are baking a cake, right? You are baking a cake. When you bake a cake, you put different flavor, dimension to it, different ingredient to it. Therefore, the fun stuff about second order is like, you will have a certain favorable characteristic that explain the definition of the second order construct. And that is the reason why higher order construct or second order construct is important. The second reason why people use second order construct, which I have explained just now, is it helps to reduce the number of path model relationship. And this because of reducing the number of path model relationship, which I'm going to explain in further slide. It focuses on the fundamental of parsimonious, right? Sometimes you do not want your model to be complex. Therefore, using a second order construct, you reduce the number of path model relationship, or so-called what we said hypothesis relationship. Therefore, it will become a parsimonious. The third point why second order is important is help to overcome the bandwidth fidelity dilemma. Why? According to which there's a trade-off between variety of information, thoroughness of testing to obtain more certain information. Sometimes there's a trade-off between bandwidth and fidelity. Why? When you don't test second order construct, you test the dimension level, you could have variety of information. When you have variety of information, like for example, I use the concept of engagement. Okay, engagement come from HR field. Okay, employee engagement. When we talk about employee engagement, we have physical engagement, we have emotional engagement, and we have cognitive engagement. And these are called variety of information, bandwidth, right? So when we have bandwidth, variety of information, we can test a lot of multiple dimension to it, like physical, emotional, and cognitive. We want to see which effect is the most important. But again, there's a trade-off, because sometimes, researchers would not want to care physical, emotional, and cognitive. People want to know whether your company engaged or not. Do not tell me physical, do not need to tell me emotional, do not need to tell me cognitive, but just tell me whether your employee engaged or not. Therefore, this is part of fidelity, where more certain information, which is the overall information, that is what we call engagement, the total overall of engagement. So that is the third reason. For the fourth reason why people use second order is because sometimes you will face an issue of high collinearity, or maybe sometimes you could face an issue of discriminant validity. So, it's like almost the same between collinearity and discriminant validity, where, your respondent feel that the item supposed to belong to that item, and the other item follow to be supposed highly correlate with other item. Therefore, high collinearity could cause an issue that could penalize your model to perform good in terms of results. So therefore, people use second order to overcome this issue of collinearity. Therefore, they perform the second order construct. Okay, so these are the few reasons why higher order construct are significantly important in research. But again, don't misunderstand what I've mentioned, that I'm not a big fan. Okay, I always try to make things easier for publication. So if I can avoid, and things are not complex, I can avoid second order, I will avoid. But if you cannot avoid because according to literature said so, then you use it. So don't misunderstand my word. Okay, I'm not trying to say that I don't do second order construct, but if I can avoid, I'm not a big fan. If I can avoid, I avoid. Okay, so that is my explanation. So things to ponder before you look into the second order construct or higher order construct. Again, people like to do a second order construct because when you look in second order construct, we have the perception. I think this perception always comes from the Asian perspective. I do not know Western and European perspective, but from a Asian perspective, we have this mentality is like, when I do a higher order model or second order construct, it looks, super fancy, super sophisticated. When there's a super fancy and super sophisticated, therefore, my chances for me to get my research published or get a PhD is higher. Why? Because it involves construct that operationalize at higher level of abstraction. But again, sometimes when you do a second order construct, you must think twice, which is the theory must support the decision to use higher order models. Why the theory must support? You cannot simply form a second order because you think so, you said so, or maybe the literature is not complete. Okay, when you look into certain articles and journal, the literature seems to be not complete, and therefore, because of not complete information, you simply perform an higher order models because you could say that this could be my contribution. My answer to you is a no-no situation. Why is a no-no situation? You must have a theory to perform higher order models. You can't simply do it yourself, okay? Unless you're talking about scale development or scale validation, then that will be a different scenario or different topic to discuss. But again, if you just simply do it, maybe because of collinearity issue, just simply form a second order construct, then it's a no-no situation, okay? Like, for example, service quality, right? Service quality got the Parasuraman 5 dimension, right? So you can measure just the 5 dimension, but you can measure as overall service quality with the dimension from the service quality. So because of that, there is a tested relationship between service quality and maybe towards the outcome. You have a theory to support using service quality as the overall. So when you have a theory to support to use overall, then you can form a second order construct. But if you don't have, like for instance or example, that if service quality, there's no theory support that nomological net or nomological validity, that service quality can lead to certain outcome. Rather, they just mention that the dimension can lead to the outcome, then you cannot form a second order. But because there's a literature and theories to say so, then therefore service quality itself can form a second order construct. So I hope you get the gist of it. Okay, you need to have a theory to support the decision to use higher order model construct. And when we talk about this higher order construct, the fun part about higher order construct is there are 4 possible types of second order construct, which I'm going to explain in the next slide. There are 4 types which combine the concept of reflective or formative. When I go into this reflective formative, I will explain later what the current literature said. Especially in the 2020, there are a lot of debate that use the terminology nature of reflective formative in a different manner, which I'm going to explain later. But right now, back to the fundamental of PLS, we just focus on reflective formative. Because some people, when you go to higher discussion and debate with top PLS researcher in the world, not Malaysian researcher or not me, I mean, you are talking with those like European scholars or US scholar, they don't use reflective formative to form a second order. Rather, they will use common and composite that form the second order nature. But right now, we just stick with the fundamental, reflective or formative. Okay, so when you want to measure or evaluate the higher order construct, you need to also make sure that when you measure your higher order construct, your lower order construct and higher order construct, the first important stuff that you need to look is always reliability and validity, right? You need to check assessment. It is just the same standard of assessment checking. You need to check, okay? Then the evaluation of measurement quality is you need to know which relationship you need to interpret. If you are doing multi-dimension, then you do not need to higher order interpretation. But if you are doing higher order construct, second order construct, you do not need to have you do not need to have the dimension to explain the outcome. So therefore, you need to know the right interpretation. If you do second order, then you interpret the second order towards the outcome. If you don't do second order, you have dimension, then you use the dimension to explain outcome. Don't misinterpret this result, because I also saw some researcher, I do not want to say who, but they misinterpret. They do a second order, they explain the second order relationship, they also explain the multi-dimension relationship towards the outcome. So this could be very disturbing, and this could be erroneously interpret the relationship, could be bad. Okay, and again, when you do a second order, you do not need to neglect the discriminant validity assessment. You need to check also. Okay, if you don't check, then there's a problem. So these are the few things that you need to take consideration when you do a higher order construct or second order construct. So as I know my video will be recorded and will be posted in social media, so I will very careful to use the word, right? I do not want to confuse you. Let us focus by Jarvis et al. 2003 and a colleague. Just be focused normal terminologies. Right? We just focus reflective and formative. There are debates that these are not called reflective formative. Okay, if you use a really approach of second order construct, some people will call it reflective as common factor and formative as composite. I will not want to go to that debate, but right now we stick with this normal terminologies, which is from Jarvis. Okay, so Jarvis mentioned that there are 4 types of second order construct. The first type will be the most common one, where we call reflective, where you can see your lower order construct point to the items, reflective, and your second order construct point to the dimension, also called reflective. Okay, and we have type 2. The type 2 will be reflective formative, where the lower order construct, the items itself are reflective, but when it comes to forming the second order construct, the dimension arrow point to the second order construct, and therefore this is what we call formative. So this will be a type 2. And in terms of type 3 will be formative reflective, and type 4 will be formative. If you were ask me, Jacky, which type that we supposed to use, I'm not a big fan of reflective. In the past, maybe yes, because at the time we have no option. We could use like CB-SEM. In CB-SEM, we only can perform reflective type. But as things progress to PLS, there are 4 types that can be performed, as I mentioned just now. But what I want to highlight here is reflective formative. Why reflective formative? Why reflective formative? When I say reflective formative here is because according to Cadogan and Lee, there's this author, Cadogan and Lee. I don't know. Let me stop here. I share you. If I can find the article, I will share with you. Later on, I will share with you. This article, Cadogan and Lee, mentioned that there's no such thing when you do a second order construct, measure it as reflective. I know maybe some people will say that, oh, past literature do so, doing reflective. But according to Cadogan and Lee, 2013, if I recall, there's no such thing called reflective. Why? If you back to the fundamental of understanding the nature of reflective formative, when we talk about reflective, the item all sounds alike, it looks alike, and it represents based on the concept and the items, right? It is called reflective because the item sounds alike, looks alike. But when we talk about formative, the fundamental way here is the items are all different, right? The items are not all different, and they itself, the nature, when we talk the items are different, they could be represent as artifact, according to Georg Henseler, represent as artifact. And some people will call it represent as ingredients. Why it is ingredients? Because when you form a formative, their nature itself is actually ingredients. Ingredients which they are different. If you talk about reflective, because the item are interchangeable, so therefore the item is the same. So back to the concept of second order construct. If you talk about second order construct, when we talk about formative second order construct, when we talk about formative second order construct, so formative here, we call this as ingredient, okay? When we talk about ingredient, try to imagine if you have this dimension, and this dimension, let's say back into the fundamental, okay? When we talk about employee engagement, we have physical engagement, emotional engagement, and cognitive engagement. So when we talk about engagement, physical, emotion, and cognitive, these are actually ingredients. They are actually different, right? Physical engagement are completely different from emotional engagement. Also completely different from employee engagement, also different compared to cognitive engagement. So because of these differences, they could not become manifest, okay? They could not be sounds alike, looks alike, they are different. So when they are different, therefore, the trend of using type 2 reflective formative tends to be higher because of this nature itself. When we talk about dimension, they are different. When they are different, they're supposed to be tested using reflective formative because they are ingredients that form second order construct. So therefore, this trend of using reflective tends to be quite obsolete in this current research trend. So therefore, today we're going to focus more on this technique called reflective formative. Okay, I hope you're all clear with this. Okay, now let us move on. Okay, so when we talk about if you're doing secondary data and you're doing finance data, okay, you are doing secondary finance data, then I could say that this one tends to be not really, you don't really use this one. But if you plan to use secondary data, I think usually finance and accounting people will always do formative. Why? Because the items itself are different, they are ingredients, so therefore they form the lower order construct. From the lower order construct, they will form into second order construct. So therefore, when you talk about, for example, sales, rewards and non-rewards, we have a lot of type of rewards, non-rewards in an ingredient manner or attributes manner. Therefore, they form it as formative. So usually when you see type 4, usually people will see it as usually used in secondary data and so on. But today, we're going to focus only the type 2, which is reflective formative, because the trend are moving towards this reflective formative. Okay? I'm not saying the rest is not important, but I'm trying to highlight to you that the trend are moving reflective formative, which is the type 2. Okay? So, let us move on. to the next slide. So based on my experience, this is not in literature, okay? This is based on, as a PLS researcher, I look into research and so on. Literature could say that, they have 4 types. My understanding is that why not have type 5, What is type 5? This is from my experience. I don't see people do that before. Probably when you do skill development, you could have type 5. The type 5 will be you have mixed in your lower order components, right? You have mixed results of your lower order component. Therefore, we call it mixed formative reflective, where your lower order components could have formative here, and then here is reflective. But when we move into the lower order from second order, it could be a formative. So from my understanding, it could be type 5. There could be a type 5, but none of the PLS researcher really focus on type 5. Not say that I'm right, but I think there could be, because in PLS, we are talking about composite, right? When you do a composite modeling, it could be, you could actually perform a type 5 second order construct. So this is just my thought that can potentially, do it, okay? If you do a skill development, could be, okay? Just a thought, okay? Just for sharing for today, okay? Let us move on. So again, why people contribute second order construct? Because again, there's advantages to it, right? It makes things more parsimonious. So like what I mentioned just now, in terms of there's a trade-off between when you do a second order construct or not to do a second order construct. So if you do a second order construct, it will be like your model A. If you don't do a second order construct, you will be like model B, right? Model B, you can see there's a lot of hypotheses, a lot of relationship towards your endogenous. The problem with this will be not parsimonious in your model B compared to model A, which is more parsimonious. But the good thing about model A, although it is the good thing about model B is, although there's a lot of relationship, but as you can see here, if you look into the in-sample prediction, where I talk about R-square value, model B will always higher than model A because of multiple relationship. The more relationship you have pointing at your endogenous variable, then therefore you could really say that model B will have stronger in-sample prediction power compared to model A, right? But then model A could have advantages in terms of parsimonious. So this is the trade-off that you need to think, okay? Whether you want to have more information in model B or you want to have more parsimonious. So you need to think twice as a researcher to think about it, okay? So let us move on. So how to estimate this higher order construct or maybe second order construct and so on, okay? So as you can see, there are multiple estimation way, okay? I'm not trying to say which way is the best, okay? I have gone through all the way, all the approaches I've gone through. I know how to work on all those approaches, but today I'm going to cover a couple, which is just the fundamental one, so that things are easier, okay? We have a repeated indicator approach. This will be by Ward, 1982. And then we have the embedded two-stage approach by Ringel et al. 2012. We're going to have disjoint two-stage approach by Becker et al. 2012. And then we have the extended repeated indicator approach suggested by Becker itself, 2012. And then we have hybrid approach. We have a three-stage approach. This is more higher level, where this is assumed common and composite, right? The lower order construct is common factor, and then the second order construct is lower, which is the composite model. Okay, so this one I will not cover today, but I only cover 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm going to cover 1, 2, 3, and 4 today. Okay, for the 5, 6, 7, 8, I'm not covering. Okay, we have the following one will be improved extended repeated indicator approach. And the last but not least, which is the current one, the Schubert's 2020 two-stage approach on composite second order. So they have different way, but as you can see, the Van Riel approach 2017 and Schubert 2020 almost alike, but their main focus, okay, I would like to highlight their main focus is focused on model fit. When you do a second order construct and you form a second order construct, and whether it's supposed to be a second order construct, then they will depend on a model fit. Okay, model fit criteria in PLS to determine the second order construct. Okay, but I'm not going to highlight that. I see the okay, don't get me wrong. I see the advantages of the model fit criteria by the Florence Schubert 2020, as well as Van Riel and the team Georg Hanseler. I see the benefit to using model fit, but what I want to highlight today is just the fundamental 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, if you need more detail about the hybrid approach, 3-stage approach, repeated indicator, and Schubert 2-stage approach on composite second order, you can feel free to email to me. Okay, but again, you also can email a message to the origin of the techniques. Okay, there are a lot of approach, but today we're going to cover the fundamental. Okay, so we're covering the fundamental. We first explain the first technical consideration when you do a second order construct in PLS is it does not allow phantom variables. Phantom variables mean construct do not have item. Therefore, because of phantom variables, which is an issue in PLS, Ward 1982 come out a technique to measure a second order construct using a technique called repeated indicators approach. In this repeated indicator approach, you can clearly see is that the dimension itself, the items of the dimension x1, x2, x3, x4, x5, x6, x7, x8, x9 are repeated in the second order construct. And this is what we call repeated indicator approach. Okay. The other technical consideration, this is also similar for type 3 and type 4. The items are repeated. Okay. It is the same. The second technique to perform second order construct is like when you do a reflective formative second order construct. As I highlight in my title, formative second order construct, which is the type 2. When you do a second order construct, which is the type 2, of course, it is a bit complicated compared to the traditional one where you just focus on repeated indicator approach. Why? If you do a formative second order construct, okay, reflective formative, especially when it is endogenous formative second order construct, as you can see in my third point, there's always a problem. Okay, the problem here is your R square of your second order construct, when you measure it as an endogenous construct, it will almost equal to 1, or the value itself of your R square will become 1 and your path coefficient will become 0. There's a reason why this thing occurs. Okay, because when you do a formative second order construct, the dimension itself form the second order construct, and then the other IV point to the second order construct, then your R square will become 1 because it cannot be influenced by any other variables, or else there's issue. From that itself, there are other technique called the disjoint two-stage approach or embedded two-stage approach, or one we call joint two-stage approach, which I'm going to explain further. For example, this is move towards the second order construct. Just now that one is repeated indicator approach. Now we move into two-stage approach. When you do a two-stage approach, which is the second technique which I'm going to teach today, is something like this. If you have like this, dimension 1, dimension 2, dimension 3, point at your endogenous, right? Point at your endogenous variables, and you have another variable point towards your endogenous variables. You check and run such analysis using repeated indicator approach, you have an issue called R square equals to 1. Therefore, you need to perform a two-stage approach. Therefore, you need to start from the build-up approach. From the build-up approach of the first step, which is this step, then you can save the latent variable score from the second order construct and form it into such a way. And this is what we call disjoint two-stage approach. Okay, so I'm going to show you all this thing. If you are confused with this thing, later the empirical example, I'm going to show you the same stuff. Okay, and the other one that I'm going to show you, which is the fourth step, will be the repeated indicator approach, but you extend it by using the total effect of it. So this is another way of doing a second order construct where you have dimension 1, dimension 2, dimension 3, and this dimension 1, dimension 2, dimension 3 form the mediator as your endogenous variable, which is called your mediator right here will be second order construct. And then you have IV, you have DV. So therefore, you do not need to do two-stage approach. what you need to do is extend the repeated indicator approach by pointing the IV towards the dimension 1, dimension 2, dimension 3. And therefore, you have your extended repeated indicator approach to perform the second order construct assessment. So I will stop here because I have finished my slide on the second order construct, and I will look into the question.